In today's episode of Obscure Weapons on Schola Gladiatoria channel, we're looking at the Chinese bar mace. This is a very brief overview of a weapon which I stumbled across when looking through the British Museum's online collection, and I discovered one and wanted to learn more about it. And in searching, I found lots of excellent information on the Mandarin Mansion website, curated by Peter Decker, link below. Now, many people who watch my channel will be familiar with the form of jian that was used in the Ming and Qing dynasties, and indeed forms of jian that were used before that. The jian, of course, being a straight double-edged sword with this very characteristic style of hilt. But what surprised me is there is a form of bar mace which has this style of hilt, but instead of having a double-edged blade, it has essentially a square bar for a blade. Now, this is, of course, a mace. It's a percussive weapon. These are heavier than the standard swords, which have a flat, distally tapered, thin blade with edges, of course, and as you might expect, they are designed to be used as a mace. Now, what's interesting is they seem to go all the way back to the Song dynasty, but were particularly popular, as far as I can gather, in the Ming and Qing dynasties, and in fact all the way up really until the 19th century as well, and seem to have been commonly used by bodyguards and guards and elite special forces. Now, I've so far avoided saying the Mandarin name for this weapon because I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce it, so I'm putting it on screen now. But it seems to take the form of Tiěbiān, which I think is probably Tiěbiān, something like that. But I'm not at all proficient in any form of Chinese language, so I'm not going to try and tell you how to pronounce it, but that is how you write the word. And quite simply, it seems that they were favoured by elites, by elite soldiers, and it is a form of mace. Now, there's a parallel, of course, here with European and indeed Persian, Middle Eastern warfare as well, where maces are often associated with people who both wear armour and fight against other people wearing armour. Now, when we actually look in the historical documents, both Chinese, but equally if we go to the Middle East, if we look at Iranian or Persian manuscripts, even Mamluk from Egypt, and then if we look at Europe as well, there are essentially two main features which any form of mace seems to have been expected to perform in. Number one is compromising armour. So clearly standard swords aren't very effective against armour because armour developed precisely to prevent those weapons from being effective against them. So therefore the mace becomes very effective at giving a blow which has a percussive effect even through armour. But the second interesting feature, which doesn't get mentioned so much, is maces, certainly in the period documents, and this is true of Chinese documents apparently from what I've read, as well as Persian documents and European documents, is that maces were expected to break other weapons, and there are specific mentions of smashing enemies' sword blades with them. So if you imagine that you have something, in the case of this particular Chinese example, you've got something which has a hilt that looks like a standard sword hilt. So your opponent might not realise what it is you are swinging at them, but you swing it with an awful lot of force with this square, heavy, robust bar, somewhat like a crowbar or a pry bar really, and they put a parry up or a ward with their blade, there's a good chance that you are going to smash through, either with percussive force, collapse their guard or parry, or you're actually literally going to break the blade. Now, we have to remember, of course, in period that sword blades weren't made of modern steel with modern heat treatment. They were more likely to break. And additionally, when you've got a very fine edge meeting a fast and heavy moving square bar, even if you don't literally shatter the blade or break it in two, there's a good chance you'll take a great big chip out of the edge, which with another strike might lead to that sword breaking. So these are very, very interesting weapons that seem to have been used in exactly the same contexts in China, pretty much, as maces were used in the Middle East and Europe as well. And we should also mention that bar maces like this, although it is an obscure weapon, because I suspect a lot of you watching this won't be familiar with the Chinese form here, these bar maces were things that existed in Europe as well, and we do see them in European art. And there were similar things in Japan, and there were similar things in the Middle East as well. So it's not a completely unique idea. Why would you have a bar mace rather than a typical mace with a lump on the end? Well, essentially it's more nimble. So it's somewhere between a typical mace and a sword. So you can have some of the benefits of a sword with some of the benefits of a mace. But very, very interesting weapon. And I would also say specifically in regards to the form of Chinese bar mace, which has segments or kind of notches along the blade. I suspect that this was designed like this to enable defensive actions with this particular thing. So if someone's swinging a dao at you, or a jian, or a glaive, any form of edged weapon, there's a chance that by blocking with it you can catch in one of those notches, or at least bind for long enough to give an advantage of some kind, which is not something you can typically do with an edged weapon, because an edged weapon has to have a sharp edge and can't necessarily have notches all along it, although you could say that wavy blades perhaps perform a similar function. But anyway, fascinating weapon. Hopefully you now know about a new weapon, or a little bit more about this new type of weapon. Go and check out the link below to Mandarin Mansion, where you can read a little bit more about their use as well. Cheers, folks.